Well, hey everybody, my name is Kent. I'm lead pastor here at Epic. Everybody here at Parkside, do me a favor, help me welcome everybody who's watching from our other locations, yeah? Fairmount, Center City, Roxborough. Love you guys. So glad you're at church today. It's going to be a great day. This is the final week in the series we've been in for the last several weeks called Relationships. And you got to be careful when you say it's a little bit of a tongue twister. You might mess up and say something else. And I know some of you, you've been waiting all series for one of us to have a moment and say something and put it on YouTube. So not going to happen. This is the last week. I think we're going to make it and move on to the next thing. So I'm very excited about that. But it's been a super helpful series. And I think that if you missed any of it, you should certainly go back and make sure you catch up at epic.church. All the stuff is loaded up from the last several weeks, and you can find all the information there. So make sure you check that out. All right, today I want to talk with you about what I think is one of the most important relation shifts that you'll ever make in your life, and I am not overhyping it. So very excited about that. First, I'll tell you a story. Years ago, I was sitting at the house on the couch watching TV, flipping through the channels, just kind of surfing, and I came across a triathlon. These people are amazing. They're incredible. First of all, they're all incredibly good looking, all of them. All of the triathletes are incredible. And I don't know if you know what a triathlon is, but it's essentially this big race where all these people swim for forever. And then after they swim for forever, they run and they jump on a bicycle and then they bike for forever. And then after they bike for forever, they get off the bike and they just start running down the street as fast as they possibly can for forever. That's what a triathlon is. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching this, and it sounds exciting, it really does, but I gotta tell you, it's a little boring to watch. It really is. So it's just basically some groups of people either swimming, bicycling, or running with each other down the street. And so I'm watching this thing, and in order for I think the commentators to keep your attention and keep you engaged in what's happening, they would cut away to all these incredibly inspirational stories about these different athletes. They'd say things like, this person grew up in the slums of Calcutta. They learned to run fast because they're always chased by tigers. I'm like, tigers? Are you serious? Chased by tigers? That's a bad day. Like, you have one slow day and you're done. Where's your brother? I don't know. I think the tiger got him. So that's not, if your neighborhood has a tiger, stop. You got to move if the neighborhood's got a tiger. I'm just saying. So that, and then the announcer said this one thing about one of the athletes. He said this. He says, and this athlete was born with no feet. And I was like, what? No feet? He's doing this with no feet? And they cut to a picture of him, and here he is running like the wind down the road with no feet. I'm like, how in the world is this happening right now? And honestly, as I'm watching this on TV, I'm starting to kind of reevaluate my own life. I'm like, man, I grew up in North Carolina. I've never been chased by a tiger. Actually, I've never been chased by anything. When I was a kid, I didn't even play tag because I knew that was just not going to be a good game for me, right? Like if someone started running toward me, I'm like, I'm it. All right, I'm it. And then the game would just be over because I'm not going to chase anybody. It's just like, let's hide and seek. Let's do something else. So let's move on, So in fact, if I think about it, I never was chased by anybody. I never chased anything. The only thing I ever chased was the ice cream truck because everybody chased the ice cream truck. And you had to be fast in my neighborhood to catch an ice cream truck. Not because the ice cream man drove fast, but because we never had money on ourselves. So you had to run home first. Anybody else had to run all the way home, get money and run back out and hope that he was still in the neighborhood. So that's fun. Oh, real quick, side story. This has nothing to do with anything. It's just extra bonus. In my family, I didn't want my kids to know that the ice cream truck had ice cream. So when they were little, I told them it was the music truck. So my kids would stand outside and just wave at the music truck while it went by. And I was like, isn't that fun? The music truck. Kids are like. I shouldn't have told that story. I don't know where I'm at now. So the only time I ever tasted anything was the ice cream truck, and I'm sure I beat some of those land speed records trying to get back to that thing. So I'm sitting there on the couch, I'm watching this thing, and I'm reevaluating my whole life. I'm thinking, man, first of all, I grew up in North Carolina, had it pretty good. Second of all, never got chased by a tiger. That's another thing. And on top of all that, I look down and I realize I've got 2 perfectly good feet, 2 of them. 2 whole feet, and I'm not doing nothing with them. I'm sitting on the couch. I'm really starting to question myself, like, what am I doing with my life? So these commentators continue on. They're telling story after story after story about all these athletes, about how they overcame adversity, how they beat incredible odds, and how, it's amazing that they got to where they are. And while they're talking, the music behind them would begin to swell. I mean, it'd just be this emotional kind of moment. And I got so caught up in it that it literally brought me to tears. In fact, I got so inspired watching this on the television that I got so caught up in the moment. I stood to my feet and I just declared, that's it, I'm gonna run. So I went and put my tennis shoes on. Kid you not. Walked over to the front door, opened the door, walked outside and thought, it's hot. Went back inside, sat on the couch and ate a ho-ho. And here's what I learned. Inspiration alone ain't enough. Isn't that true? Inspiration alone, it's just not enough. I mean, think about it. Think about all the things you've been inspired to do in the moment and then haven't followed through and done at all. And as I think about this in my own life, not only have there been things that I've been inspired to do but then haven't done, there's been things that I've had a conviction to do and then just didn't do. You know what I mean by having a conviction? Like I knew what the right thing to do was, and I still didn't do it. Now, I don't know, I'm just guessing here, but I'd be willing to bet that I'm probably not the only one. Anybody else with me? Okay, a couple honest people in the whole church. Okay, that's good, we're good. Now, case in point, think about this as far as having convictions and not following through. Today is February 18th. How you doing on your New Year's resolution? I know, right? Right, see, everybody you're my people. Thank you so much. Now, I do want to acknowledge the other people in the room, with the perfect teeth and face and all that stuff, who kept their New Year's resolutions. So if that's you, and I'm really proud of you, if that's you, I want to celebrate you. So if you made a New Year's resolution, you've kept it, by show of hands, let me see you. Wow, come on, let's celebrate those people. That's both incredible and irritating all at the same time. That you were able to do that. So that's pretty cool. Hey, here's the thing about New Year's resolutions. They say that 90% of them won't make it for 6 months. 30% of them don't make it 6 days. And I actually had a New Year's resolution that didn't make it 6 minutes. I won't tell you the story, but it has to do with cookies. Anyways. And so being inspired sometimes isn't enough. Having a conviction about something isn't always enough. The truth is, we all know that even being committed to something isn't always enough, right? You ever buy a treadmill? Anybody ever buy a treadmill? Yeah, that's commitment. A treadmill takes up a whole room. Your whole room is just for that. 30% of your house is filled up with a treadmill, right? I mean, that's commitment. And when you bought that thing, you were so committed. You were like, I am all about this. I'm buying a treadmill today. You got a treadmill, and you got the outfit that went with it, because you're like, I got to look good while I'm on my treadmill. You tried on the outfit, looked in the mirror, you're like, I feel thinner already. I think this is working right now. This is okay, right? But come on, let's be honest. Some time has passed. That treadmill's not even plugged in anymore. It's not. There's stuff piled on top of it. Tell the truth. It's true. There's stuff piled on top of the treadmill. You use it to put hangers on. That's what you do with the treadmill, right? But here's what's crazy about that. At some point, you were so committed to something that you went and bought a whole treadmill and had it put in your house. But now there's just a pile of stuff on it. Why is that? Why is it that inspiration and having conviction and being committed to something isn't enough? I think it's because something is missing. Something is missing, and it's really important that we figure out what it is, because let's face it, it's one thing to blow it when it comes to a few New Year's resolutions, but it's a whole nother thing to blow it when what hangs in the balance is your reputation, or a relationship or the respect of your spouse or the respect of your kids or maybe even the future that God planned for you to have, man, there's way too much at stake. There's way too much that hangs in the balance. There's way too much to lose for us not to find out what's missing. It turns out, man, this is a problem that isn't new. Like, this isn't like a 21st century problem. This is an every century problem. People have been struggling with this since like the very beginning. In fact, in the very first century, the writer of a letter called Hebrews talks about this specific challenge that we have. Unfortunately for us, he also gives us a solution. And that's what we're gonna look at this morning. So here we go, Hebrews chapter 3, starting in verse number 12. Here's what the writer of Hebrews said about this. He said this, "See to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God." Now look at that word, turns away. Now that's interesting. I mean, think about this. Who would do that? Like, who would turn away from the living God? Who would look at God and say, okay, God would want me to do this, but I am choosing to do that? Who would do that? Don't answer all at once. I would do that. You would do that. We all would do that. In fact, we probably do that all the time. But this verse is huge because it implies that I have the potential and you have the potential, no matter how long you have or haven't been a follower of Jesus, no matter how much you know or don't know about God, no matter what your religious pedigree is or what your background is or who you know and who your sister is and your grandpa was a preacher one time and like all these things, no matter any of that stuff, every single one of us has the potential to have a sinful, unbelieving heart that can cause us to slowly turn away from God. Like every single one of us has that potential. In fact, some of you would say, yeah, that's about right. Like that's my story, in fact. Like there was a time when faith and God and church was a pretty big deal in my life, but over time, things have just kind of changed. And it's just not as important to me as it once was. Or maybe your story would be a little bit different. Maybe you'd say, no, man, things are great now. Like I'm working toward a relationship with God and what that looks like, and I'm learning who God is and what His character's like, and church is a priority for me, and being in places like this really matters to me, and all that kind of stuff. But there's a time when I kind of stepped away. Like there was a season where I just wasn't all about that, and you'd say, Ken, I never really thought about it in those terms, but that's actually what happened to me. Like everything was going good, and then all of a sudden, I just kind of slowly turned away. Like I can't put my finger on the exact day or the exact moment. Just, I woke up one day and was like, away, you know? And then if you're not a follower of Jesus and you're in the room, what we're talking about right now is probably just confirming some of your suspicions about all those Christians. You're like, I knew they weren't as committed as they pretend to be, right? Which could be true, right? Why is it that we lose our way in college? And why is it that we don't make the best decisions on a business trip? And why is it that we don't make the best decisions when the pressure's on, or that we don't make the best decisions when everything's going great? It feels like there's no pressure at all. Why is it that sometimes we lose our way on the heels of a big transition, like we have a new relationship, or we get a new job, or we move to a new city? Why is that? Here's why. It's because our natural tendency is to drift away from what's good. Did you know that? Have you ever noticed that? Like your natural tendency, my natural tendency is to drift away, not toward, to drift away from what's good. In fact, we rarely drift in a good direction. Like we rarely just naturally drift in a good direction personally or morally or financially or as it relates to our health, you know? Like I've never just naturally drifted toward a salad. That's never happened. Not one time in my whole life. If I was eating a salad, man, that was intentional. That was like, there's no food left on the planet. My wife got me eating a salad right now. In fact, truth is that if it's good for us, we actually drift away from it. We drift away from exercise, drift away from budgets, drift away from healthy relationships. Listen, you don't drift your way into a healthy relationship. No, that takes work. It takes intentionality. It takes energy. It takes time to have a healthy relationship. You got to work at that thing. And it doesn't just go for our people relationships, but it also goes for our relationship with God. In order to have a great relationship with God, it's going to take some effort. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some intentionality. It's going to take some energy, right? You got to put some energy behind that, some thought behind that. So here's the big deal. In every area of life that matters, what's best seems like is always upstream. Like in every area of life that matters, in every area of life that matters, what's best seems like it's always upstream. Whether you're trying to have a healthy marriage or relationship with your kids, trying to overcome bitterness or anger, you're trying to deal with a difficult boss, you're trying to live generously, whether you're trying to achieve academic excellence, or even if you're trying to have a great relationship with God, in every single area of life that actually matters, feels like the natural current of things is away from what's best and not toward it. And so consequently, if you're gonna get to what's best in all those different areas of your life, then it's gonna take some energy. It's gonna take some effort. It's gonna be an upstream, an uphill battle. But man, you know what I'm learning about it? It's so worth it. It's so worth it to put the work in. It's so worth it to put the energy into your relationships. It's so worth it to put some energy into what God would have for you in your future. It's so worth it to go after those things. So worth it. But I think the thing we need to recognize, is that we drift. You drift, I drift. We all drift. Every single one of us. And so now that you know that, now that you know that that's true, that you drift and that I drift, we all drift, it would make sense for the rest of this message to go something like this. I'd say, listen, I don't want you to drift. And then I would share some inspirational story about somebody who probably had no feet and then didn't drift. And you'd be like, wow, he didn't drift with no feet. Wow. Right? You'd be inspired by that. And then I'd encourage you to have some convictions about what's right and what's wrong. And then I'd give you a verse for that. And then I'd ask you to make a commitment to do the right thing. And then I'd show you a picture of a puppy, because that always works. I put a picture of a puppy up there, and you'd all be like, oh, there's a puppy. And then the band would come up, and they'd start singing one of those ballads, one of those songs where it's like, oh, the over. I mean, we'd be like, oh, having this moment, right? And some of you, in that moment would break down and go, that's it. I'm not gonna drift anymore. Like from this moment on, I'm giving my life to Jesus. He showed a picture of a puppy. I have to. I'm giving my life to Jesus. I'm giving my love to Jesus. I'm giving my leadership to Jesus. I'm giving my loyalty to Jesus, and a bunch of other L words like my liver, everything. I'm giving it all to Jesus. And then if we really wanted to milk it, I had you come forward. You come up to the front, and we'd all have a moment, right? And I'd look at the band and I'd say, hey, sing it again. And they'd sing it again. And there'd be tears coming down, and some of you'd have snot bubbles and stuff. And some of you would leave thinking, man, that was the greatest worship service we've ever had. And others of you would be like, man, I hope we never do that again. But those of you who would say it's the greatest thing ever, you'd say that because now you feel committed. And now you feel like you've got some convictions. And now, because of what happened, you've been inspired. And you leave this place inspired, but you know what would happen? You'd still drift. You'd still drift. Now, don't get me wrong. I love a good snot bubble moment. I love a good let's sing it again moment. I love a good soaring ballad and worship moment. I love all those things. And not because of the emotion of it all, but because I know the power of what God can do in a person's life in a moment like that. And I know the power of what God has done in my life in moments like that. I'm not downing any of those things. Those can be great things. I'm just saying that as we move through this passage that we're reading this morning, that's not where this goes. In fact, as we read through this passage, if we'd look a little closer at the verse we already read, we'd see that the solution to the problem of drifting is right in front of our eyes. So let's read it again. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 12. The writer says, "See to it, brothers and sisters, all of you, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God." He says, see to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you, and this isn't, he's not saying, hey, see to it that you yourself don't fall away, that your heart doesn't drift from the living God. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, this is plural. He's saying, see to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you, like none of plural, all of you, that none of you all, that none of y'all, if you're from the South, that none of youans, if you're from North Philly, that none of all of you that are here and part of this particular group, see to it that none of you drift away from God. See, this isn't an individual thing. This is a group thing. This isn't just a me thing. This is a we thing. In other words, what he says here is that all of you need to make sure that none of you are drifting away from God. He's saying that's what you do for each other. All of you need to make sure that none of you is drifting away from God. And here it is. Here's the thing that's been missing. Here's what so many of us who've been inspired and had the snot bubble, who've had convictions, who've made commitments, have been missing all along. It's about having someone or some someones in your life who are close enough to you that they would notice when your heart starts to drift. That's the thing that's missing. Having someone or some someones in your life who are close enough to you that they would notice when your heart starts to drift. This is why, since the very beginning, early days of our church, we've always said, there's something that happens in circles that just doesn't happen in rows. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the rows. I think the rows are great. We got 4 different locations that are full of rows, full of people, and that's an awesome thing. But there's something about circles. There's something about being face to face with another person where you start building a meaningful relationship with them because you're doing life together. There's something about building trust with another person, so much so that you can actually be honest about what's really going on in your life. There's something about being face to face with someone instead of just being shoulder to shoulder with them in a row. There's something about knowing that there's someone who knows your name and you know theirs, and you care for each other, you pray for each other, you challenge each other, you encourage one another. There's something about knowing that when you go through a tragedy, there's someone in your corner. Listen, it would be incredibly, incredibly tragic if you're part of Epic, but you only ever experience the rows. Because there's something that happens in the circles. There's something that happens in these circles of people that build relationship with each other that just doesn't happen in all these rows. And this drifting thing that we're talking about is a big part of the reason why. See, here's the thing about that. Here's the thing about rows versus circles, all right? We talk about your row. When it comes to your heart, your row don't know. Like, they don't know. Your row don't know. Take a second. Everybody, all of our locations, look down your row. Look down, look at them. Guess what? They don't know. They don't know. They don't know, right? And here's why. It's because a drifting heart doesn't show in a row. It doesn't. A drifting heart doesn't show in a row. Should I say it again except go real slow? No? You gotta admit, that's funny though. So, I wrote all that out. Isn't that ridiculous? Feel a little Dr. Seuss this morning. Get my Dr. Seuss on. Let's go. That's why we believe that circles are so much better than rows. And every time I sit across from a couple whose marriage has problems, I always ask the question, who's in your circle? Like, who do you talk to? And in every single case, there's always one of the spouses who has no circle of deep relationships where someone really knows what's going on and is talking through and they're working through stuff together. They have no circle. I was talking to one guy one time who had started a relationship with a girl at work, and he was making the decision to leave his wife and his 2 kids to go start this other relationship, and walking through that and talking about that and all this kind of stuff. And I asked him, I was like, who's in your circle? Like, who do you know? Who do you talk to? Who do you run this stuff by? Like, you think you're on an island by yourself just trying to figure all this stuff out? Like, who are you talking to? And he's like, I don't have any meaningful, close relationships. I have none. He says, all my closest friends, here's what he said, all my closest friends are female. I was like, I'm not trying to say I know how this happened, but that's how this happened, you know? Come on, you gotta have some people that are in your corner that you know. See, at the same time that guy said what he said, I can tell you so many guys that I've sat around in a circle with time and time again who would look back and say the best thing I ever did for my relationships was find a group of guys I could be in a circle with, talk about life, do life, encourage each other, challenge each other, pray with each other. Best thing I ever did for my marriage, best thing I ever did for my kids was to get together with some other dads. Best thing I ever did. Because there's something that happens in circles that just doesn't happen in all these rows. That's why. That's why. There's something about doing life with other people and hearing their struggles, knowing what they go through, going through it with them, being part of their highs and their lows. There's something about knowing someone else's story, like really knowing their story, that just almost always has this uncanny way of encouraging your own. Like there's something about someone else's faith that builds up mine. There's something about somebody else's courage that gives me some too. And there's something about someone else's hope that gives me some as well. There's something that happens in circles, I'm telling you, that just doesn't happen in all these rows. So the writer of Hebrews, he says, all of you need to make sure that none of you drift from God. But then he goes on, and look what he says next in verse 13. He says, but encourage one another daily. Now that word encourage there, it doesn't mean like, hey, tell them they got, that's a nice jacket you got on, or man, you did a good job at that thing the other day. That's not what this word encourage means. This word is a big, powerful word, and it means to urge one another, to exhort one another, to confront one another, to come alongside each other, to spur each other on, to encourage one another, to provoke one another into action. You know what's interesting about this word? This word here, encourage, it assumes that there's a relationship that's close enough that if one of the people in the relationship would start to drift away, start to lose hope, start to lose faith, that someone would be close enough that they would actually notice and feel invited enough into that person's life that they could actually say something about it without it being weird. It's the kind of thing where you're so close to someone, you could say, hey, listen, I know you're excited about this new relationship, but can we talk about it? It's the kind of relationship you have where you're so close to somebody where they can say, hey, I know you're excited about buying this new boat, and that's really cool that you get a new boat. But remember when we talked about your budget, and it was like, there's no boat money in there. So like, I don't know where you got the boat money, but we should probably talk about that, before you do something that you regret, Huh? It's kind of relationship where you can say, hey, I know you're excited about this new job, but have you thought about what that's going to do to your family and how that's going to impact them? It's the kind of relationship where you say, hey, I'm just going to bring something up that for most people would be off limits, but because we're so close, we can do that. We can talk about it. It's the biblical idea of fellowship. It's the biblical idea of community. It's this idea that we're all we got. Like, we're in this thing together. The writer of Hebrews says, hey, if you want to make it to the finish line without drifting away from God, drifting away from faith, drifting away from hope, drifting away from a place of strength, then it's going to take more than just having some convictions or some commitments or being inspired from time to time. No, you need to be deeply connected to other people. Every single one of you needs to be deeply connected to other people. You see, just as necessary and just as spiritual as praying is, so is being deeply connected to other people. Just as spiritual, just as important and necessary as making some commitments, having some convictions, being at a place like this, just as important as all those things are, so is being deeply connected, I would argue even more so, being deeply connected to other people relationally. And here's part of the reason why. You cannot grow spiritually if you're not connected relationally. You can't. You can show up in a row all day long, but you cannot grow spiritually if you're not connected relationally. It's so important. You got to have a group of people in your life who love God and who love you, who encourage you, challenge you, do life with you, and you do the same thing for them. He says, hey, I want you to be so close to people that you notice when they don't show up. I want you to be so close to people that you notice when their attitude changes just a little bit. I want you to be so close to people that they're able to tell those same things about you. Yeah? And they can say something about it, like, hey, are you okay? I want you to be so close to people that they have refrigerator rights. You know what I'm talking about, refrigerator rights? Like, these are the people that could walk up in your house, walk over to your fridge, open it up, eat your food, and you'd be like, all right. Some of you are like, I don't know any of those people. That would not be cool. Just saying, you need some people in your life, right? These are the people for whom there's nothing that's too personal. There's nothing that's off limits. It might be off limits for others, but it's not off limits for them. They could ask you anything, and it's because you know that they love you. It's because you know that they're not there to judge you, they're there to help you, they're there to encourage you, and you want to do the same thing for them. And I want you to notice what the scripture says. It says how often? It says daily. It says it says, but encourage one another daily. And that implies that this is something that happens continually, over and over and over again. And then he goes on to tell us why. He says, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. And that's interesting, isn't it? It's like, oh, what's that? What's that even mean? Like, what's that got to do with anything? And what he's saying here, he's saying, hey, I don't know if you know this, but sin is deceitful. It is. And here's how it works. It's not like there's this little sin monster comes up to you and is like, lies to you, and you're like, okay. No, you know how it works? You lie to you. Yeah, you lie to yourself, and you believe your own lies. I lie to me, and I go, that's a good idea, let's go do that thing I know I shouldn't do. Right? That's how that works. You lie to yourself. And that's the reason why you need people all up in your business, because you've got to have somebody who, when you lie to you, will tell you the truth. Right? And you've seen this play out. You know how this works. You ever have a friend who, under normal circumstances, is fairly bright, makes good decisions, And all of a sudden they run up to you one day and they're like, oh, I'm gonna go do this. And they're so excited about it. And they're so excited that you're excited, so you smile, but inside you're like, no, don't do that. That's dumb. Don't go with him. Don't go with her. Don't buy that thing. Don't do that deal. That's a bad idea. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. But outside you just went. And you don't say anything to them. Why? Because they're so excited and you don't want to hurt their feelings. So they're like, I'm going to go do it. And you're like, and then you do the next best thing and you call your mutual friends. And you're like, can you believe what so-and-so is about to go do? Oh my goodness, that's so crazy. What? What? Oh my goodness, what? You don't say anything to them. They just go ruin their life and you're like, That's not what this is. I mean, this is about caring enough to confront in a loving way. And that's really caring, right? This is a huge, huge, huge deal. Huge deal. The scripture's teaching us here is that the reason why you need to be deeply connected to other people is because at the end of the day, sin is deceitful. And it'd take you down roads you never would want to go down and keep you places you'd never want to be, right? And here's what's crazy about it. It's so deceitful that you can't see it with your own eyes. You know, there's some things that are hard to see when you're looking in the mirror. They're just hard, right? Hard to see when you're looking in the mirror. That's why we say things like they were blinded by love, because they were literally blinded by love. Blinded by money, blinded by power, literally blinded by those things. And what's crazy about those moments when somebody that you're friends with goes and does something just, you're like, what? What's crazy about it is in that moment, it's like you have crystal clear insight into the stupidity of their decision. You ever been there? Anybody ever been there? Like, that's dumb. Like, I know that's dumb. That's dumb. Right? You know what's crazy about that? There are moments when other people think the exact same thing about you. They have crystal clear insight into the stupidity of your decision, and you can't see it. And I can't see it. And so the question of the day is this: are you going to benefit from that or not? Are we going to benefit from the fact that there's some things that we can't see, but other people can see it? Are we going to benefit from that or not? Because here's what I know. It takes a we to see what you can't see. It does. It takes a we to see what you can't see. Are you going to benefit from that or not? Think about this. How different would your life be if you had some we's in your life to help you see what you can't see? What different choices would you have made? Like, your greatest regret in life could have been avoided if you'd have listened, or if you'd have had somebody who cared enough to be a we who could see what you couldn't see. How different would the family that your father grew up in be if they had those kind of relationships? How different would your mother's family be? How different would the family you grew up in be if everybody, your mom, your dad, you, how different would your teenage years be had you had a we that could see what you couldn't see and you trusted them? How different would things be? You know, almost 2 months ago, a couple friends of mine pulled me aside and they said, Kent, you okay? And normally, somebody asks me that question, I think about it, and I go, yeah, I'm fine, all good, all gravy, baby, making this thing go, here we go, you know? But because of who it was that was asking me the question, because they're my people, because they're my we, it made me pause. And I thought, maybe I'm not okay. And maybe everything isn't gravy, baby, making this thing go, here we go. And so I started thinking about that, and we started talking, and I started thinking about the last few months and kind of life and me and the last year and a half, and I realized, you know what, they're right. I'm not okay. It wasn't good. It wasn't gravy, baby. In fact, as I thought about it, I was like, man, I'm tired. This was like just after Christmas Eve. I was like, I'm tired. More tired than I've been in a while. Not just physically, but emotionally, I'm just kind of spent, And the reason why was because my father passed away about 1.5 years ago. And our first Christmas, man, I felt like it was just my job just to keep everybody together. Take care of my kids, my wife, my mom, just keep us all together. But this Christmas, it was like the first Christmas I actually got to grieve the loss of my dad. And I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know what to do with, those thoughts. And man, I'm just keep my head down and let's run and let's go do the next thing. But man, I'm so glad there was a we who could see what I couldn't see. So you know what I got to do? I got to make a couple changes. I changed my schedule. Signed myself up for some counseling. We're going to talk through this grieving thing. Like, what's that about? Like, I don't know. I'm learning, And I'm so glad because I'd have just kept my head down and kept running. I'm so glad there was a we who could see what I couldn't see. You know where that came from? Not a row. A circle. There's something that happens in circles that just doesn't happen in rows. The best things in my life have happened in circles. When I was a kid, I learned about Jesus in a circle. As I grew up, I learned about leadership in a circle. When I got married, it was my circle that danced the night away. When my father was sick, it was my circle. Came to the rescue. Said, how can we help? What can we do? We got you. We're with you. And when I couldn't see what I needed to see, it was my circle that helped me out. I want that for you. Every single one of you. I started thinking about this and I was like, man, spiritual growth happens best in a circle. Care for one another happens best in a circle. Meaningful relationships happen best in a circle. And I was like, man, if only there was some kind of system where we got people together, like all over the city, maybe in people's homes, or maybe there's like some activity groups that get together and like go running or something. Like if only there's some kind of system or program or like some like organized thing where we got people together and they build relationships with each other, and maybe some of these things that I'm talking about could just like blossom up out of those things. If only there was a way for that to happen, like some strategy. And I thought, wait a minute, there is. We call them life groups. They meet in homes all around the city. It's groups of people like you and like me who just commit for a period of time to do life together, to be in each other's corner, to know one another, to hope that maybe some meaningful relationships can blossom up out of that kind of thing. And guess what? They start this week. This week. Like, I can't make it this week. Okay, they start next week for you. That's okay, right? Yeah, epic.church/groups. There's all kinds, different days, different times. You should check them out. I want more than anything for you to be in a circle, not just a row. I'm telling you, If we'll embrace this, if we'll embrace it as a church, if you'll embrace it as an individual, it changes everything. Because there's something that happens in circles that just doesn't happen in all these rows. Amen? In a moment, your location pastor is going to come, and he's going to tell you how to find a circle.